What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Legacy Liftoff with Steve and my boy Tom. What's going on, Tom? How you doing today, man?
Not much, brother. How you living?
I'm living great. A little cold. Been shivering in my seat, man. It's been freaking cold.
Yeah, dude. How bad was the snow over in Philly?
We got like 6 or 7 inches. But
Uh,
really, like, it's just the overnight cold. It made it really like just frozen, and all the streets are slowed down. All of that nasty stuff.
Right. Right. Yeah, dude. They didn't even plow my street, so there's like still like the street literally is still filled with snow.
I hate that, man. I hate it.
I'm just like, all right. It's gonna be fun going to work tomorrow, especially with it being like freezing all day today, so it's gonna
Right.
suck.
All right, Tom. Let's get into the book of the week. This week's book was called "Dig Your Well Before You're Thirsty." Any remarks? Any first topics you want to get into right away?
I mean, I just want to talk about it just in general, just like off rip. I think it was a good read, especially for people who are very nervous or not used to networking. I
Hmm.
think it breaks down the import. Not all like I feel as though everyone knows the importance of networking to a certain degree, but I think the book does a really good job at kind of breaking down why a network is important, why a network can help you, and then how to maintain your network is how I would break the book into three different parts. And I feel as though a lot of people get stuck on the first part of how to build a network or how to network, and then kind of get lost in the misconception of what a network really is. Kind of to the point I made last week on our episode, where some people you can consider networking to be a little bit narcissistic because you show up to a networking event looking for your own personal benefit versus trying to create something. And I think the book ultimately expands on that notion really, really well, especially within the first two chapters. The author really hits home that networking not only benefits you, but it also benefits the person you're networking with. It's a mutual give and take, and it's not. You should never approach it as a one size fits all. Come in for your own gain, because as you do that, people are going to recognize it, and then people are just going to want to steer clear and stay away from you, and it
Hmm.
ultimately harms you and ruins your chances of whatever it may be. So, what do you think? Do you have any thoughts on the book?
I think overall the book, like we discussed privately, the book is very it's like a fundamental book, right? Like this is stuff that we've learned through and through in business school. Maybe not even in business, but any like college level courses, right? The importance of networking, the importance of not only like nurturing those relationships, your relationships, any relationships, really, all of your networking, but also like how to do it efficiently and how to do it in a way that you're saying like not narcissistic, right? Like where you
Right.
provide value, where you provide something um mostly over like that exchange with somebody else. So I thought it was really I mean, like I said, it was fundamental, but it's important for people who haven't heard it or who haven't gone through that kind of training before.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it really did a good job kind of breaking down the barrier to entry, if you could say,
Sure.
because I actually recommended this book. I was on a kind of like a conference call, not really, with the bar association with a couple of law students, and a few questions that come out because in the profession we tend to talk about networking and the importance of grooming and building a network.
Mm.
And some of the law students were a little abrasive and kind of didn't really know how to approach networking, and they kept on saying like, we hear everyone talk about networking, how to do it, why we should do it, X, Y, and Z, but like some of them are still very afraid and some of them are still not very, they don't fully understand and grasp it. So I actually, coincidentally, I had something like that. I could toss out the book and recommend it to a group of people who I think it actually would benefit. And in this sense, I think I'm recommending it to the same kind of class of people, people who are afraid of networking, or people who do not understand the first steps in
Mm-hmm.
networking. You know what I mean? I think, to your point of it being fundamental, I think that's exactly what it is. It's meant to be your first step, your primer, kind of like the how to networking for dummies.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
It's great that you mentioned that, right? Because here we are saying this is fundamental, you and I, right?
Mhm.
But we are educated in regards to stuff like this, particularly coming from a business background, right? If for those
Right.
who don't know, both Tom and I were accounting majors at Rutgers, and that's actually kind of how we met each other as well. But my point in saying that is, here are professionals in your profession who are trying to understand how to network. And I think you mentioned something like really key, right? They're kind of a little awkward and they're not really sure how to approach it. I almost wonder if that has to do with the generation too. Like, I mean, as much as we don't want to admit it, we're getting older now, right? We
Right.
are basically considered like getting older. Okay, we're not like old as dirt, but we're getting there, right? And my
Right.
point is like, since everything has transpired to the internet, has moved away from face-to-face relationships, has moved
Mhm.
away from like, hey, like I'm gonna go and meet these kind of people, right? Like, not to say it's completely gone, but it's swaying away from that. I think more and more people are gonna need to read books like this so that they understand what they're lacking, right? Like those relationships they don't have because they've it's not like common anymore for people to like meet face to face and to network the traditional way. It's more like through
Right.
stream or through the internet, through social networking, right? It's a little different. The networking is not the same anymore. Would you agree?
It's funny. I agree and disagree a little bit,
Okay.
just from the sense I think the book also touches on this. Um, Networking has now fundamentally become easier
Mm,
because of the internet. You know what I mean? You now have people who you never would have had access to, you know,
sure.
now you have access to them basically. Like just using LinkedIn as the go-to thing, right? Almost everyone has a LinkedIn. I'd say 9 out of 10 people I bump into, at least in the legal profession or even through school and all that. I'd say 9 out of 10 people have a LinkedIn,
Hmm.
right? So the advent of the internet and the notion of not having face-to-face interaction per se, I think that's a benefit more so than something that does harm. It's not a detriment. Uh,
Okay.
I think from what you're kind of like alluding to is just the interaction portion of it. You know, losing that human to human contact might, erode how you kind of go about certain things. But I think that just might be person to person realistically. Like I feel as though if you're an awkward person, it doesn't matter the medium in which you used to connect with each other, you're still
Sure.
gonna kind of be awkward. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think I agree. You're right. I definitely missed that point, and you're right. Like, you definitely have access to people who you wouldn't back in the day, right? So for instance, I was
Right.
just actually talking to my girl about this the other day. Before, it would just be like your network is who your parents know, who you live by, your neighbors, your postman, XYZ, right? People who are in your vicinity. You're very right when you say that because nowadays I could essentially DM Elon Musk if I wanted to, right? I
Right.
couldn't maybe I won't reach him, but still I have access. There's a link between Elon Musk and I through social media, right? So you're
Mhm.
man, that's a great point. Yeah, I completely missed that.
Because yeah, it gives us honestly it gives networking almost a new dimension and a lot more flexibility,
Sure.
and it just depends on how I guess this goes to the whole awkward notion, right? It just depends on how ballsy you want to be in
Yeah.
terms of reaching out to people because you can say if you're about to interview at company X, you can hop on LinkedIn and type in company X sort of people, look at all the people there and just pick and choose who you want to shoot a message to, you know what I mean? And I feel as though with the advent of social media, I see this on Instagram a couple times where like professionals are saying, "Oh, like if you want to connect with people, like use my template message form in my bio, or like if you want people to recognize your resume or whatever it may be, like oh follow this template or whatever." I feel as though that it kind of works in the same way now. Like networking has now become an accessible tool just because I think everyone's slowly starting to realize the importance of networking. You know.
Hmm. I think that's fair,
So
man.
okay, so here's a question for you then. So, off of what I just said, if everyone is starting to understand the importance of networking, right? Is it more important to network efficiently or effectively?
Both.
All right.
Both. But which one do I believe is maybe more impactful? I would say effectively.
Okay.
Because in the end of the day it's a numbers game, right? Like I,
Mhm.
I think it's a numbers game. It's kind of just like I mean to like a bad example I guess would be like dating, right? If you're gonna ask like only 5 girls out and 5 say no, like and then you're done, like okay, it's game
It's
over.
not.
But if you ask 15 or 20 and 5 say yes, like it's a different story, right? So I guess
Right.
similar to networking. If I'm more effective and efficient. That's why I said both. But I think effectiveness holds a higher value because little touches, like the book was mentioning, small touches, small details, remembering certain things about people, kind of standing out to them, is way more effective than like reaching the right amount of people, in my opinion, as well. You know what I'm saying? So like, I don't know. When I think about both of them, I think they're both necessary, but I definitely think effectiveness holds a higher value. How about you? Do you disagree? You agree with that? Maybe.
See, I kind of like flip how you think about it just a little bit. I think remembering the small details and grooming your network is a part of like being efficient.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or, like, so when you think of efficiency, right? You think of like, let's use basketball as an example.
Yeah.
How well your free throw percentage is, or how well your shooting splits are. You know, that's efficient. Like, if you have good shooting splits, you're efficient at what you do. So I would say I think efficiency is more important because that's what matters at the end of the day. How efficient can you establish a lasting or like a strong relationship with a person? Because
Hmm.
I agree with you in the sense that it is a numbers game. You know what I mean? You can reach out to 100 people, get 50 people to like reach back out to you, right? That's effective, right? But then how efficient are you with those 50? You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Out of all those 50 people you just connected with, do you have only one contact? Right? Is there only one person who's willing to go out to bat for you? You know what I mean?
Mm.
So I think being more efficient is better than trying to be effective.
So let me
So like,
pose this question based on what you're
but
saying then. Like in your network, would you
mm,
prefer to have 100 contacts who you are kind of like close to and could reach out to, or would you prefer to have a lesser amount? Like I guess quantity over quality, right? That's the question I'm asking. So would you prefer to have like the quantity of a network that you can kind of reach out to for whatever you need, or would you prefer a quality where it's a lower number? From based on what you're saying, I think I know, but I just want to make sure.
I think it's a quality, like a quality thing, and I think he mentions it like within the beginning of the book where he talks about, how many people can you give a 2 a.m. call to and they're willing to help you,
He
right?
definitely,
If
yep.
So it's two part. Like, the bigger and more expansive your network is, right? Sure, there's surely more people you can give that 2 a.m. call to. But at what point in time, like how he described it was, when somebody actually calls you, were you the first person they called, or were you the 51st person they called? You know what
Mm,
I mean? So I think building a very efficiently building your network
yeah,
helps you gives you the ability to run around and actually have that 2 a.m. call with basically everyone. You know what I
yeah.
mean? It doesn't matter if they're the first person or the 50th person.
Fair, fair. I like that we're having some contrasting thoughts on this because I don't think either of
Right.
us are wrong, but I don't think like it both works. All right, so to
Right.
be the devil's advocate in this, right? Or maybe just to pose a question, not even the devil's advocate. In your life, do you feel that you do a good job of networking?
I would say I think I'm a very effective networker.
Hmm.
Right? I feel versus an efficient networker, right? I think I'm effective in the sense that I can go to like I could go somewhere and do something and come away with contact,
Sure.
whether it be one, two, or three people. You know what I mean? But
Mm-hmm.
then how well that's been groomed after that, how efficiently did I use my time and thereafter is a whole different story. So
Hmm.
I think I'm an effective networker in the sense that I can come in, get a business card or get whatever or make a contact, make small conversation, but then I think I lack on the follow up.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So I could probably reach out to somebody and be like, "Hey, depending on what the situation is, I can probably have somebody agree to do something, but when it comes to like the 2 a.m. call, I don't think I have that many people to give that 2 a.m. call to." What about you?
Tom, I am the friend, and I don't know if you know this from being my friend, right? But I am the friend who, it doesn't matter when you call me, it doesn't matter how long we
Mhm.
haven't spoken. If you need help, I'll help you.
Right.
However, I'm not the friend that you call every day, like to kick up the breeze. I'm not the friend that you like, like yo, like what's going on this weekend, man? You want some food, yada yada. Like, and I don't know, man. I feel like I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing because I have so many people that I could reach out to with the same kind of
Mhm.
energy. Like, yo, if you need something, hit me up. Steve's got your back, I've got your back, whatever the case may be. But when it's like nurturing those relationships, each of those relationships is really difficult for me, man. It's difficult for me to nurture, I guess. So maybe very similar to you. I have no issues being effective in networking, but I have a really big issue of nurturing and I guess just being efficient with the network that I do have. It's hard, man.
Right. It is. I agree, and I think that's something the book really harps on is grooming and making sure to maintain your network.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like I think that is, if there's anything to take away from the book is make sure you groom your network. It doesn't matter how many people. Like you can go and grow it as much as you want, but at the end of the day, if they might remember you. Like having a might or a maybe doesn't really help. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And I think that's something the book really just. I think that's the main focus of the book.
Yeah.
Because I feel as though anyone and everyone can network. You know, but how well you do it and maintain it is what makes or breaks you. Because I know at one point he mentions kind of how they eventually stop building the network after they kind of reach to a certain point. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? What do you think about that? Do you think there's a point in time where you stop networking or stop building your network, or do you think like you always have to keep on building it?
I
So this
think it.
goes to like good.
I just think it depends on how you define a network, right? Because I was just gonna ask you this question to follow up after what you were saying now. If you define a network as like a lifelong, kind of like ikigai, right? Like a
Mhm.
lifelong net of people who you can depend on, then it's a different story, right? Because if you're building that network like ikigai, you really don't need more people after a certain extent. But if you're thinking like more like a business perspective, it's different, right? You always need
Right.
business contacts. You always need to continue to cultivate and grow that network. So I think it really just depends. That's kind of why I want to bounce it back to you real quick, right? How do you define what a network is? Like, what is a network to you?
So this has always been my take on networking in a professional sense and like networking in like a normal sense, I guess. I just consider it building friendships.
Mm-hmm.
You know? 'Cause if somebody considers you a friend to whatever degree, they're more willing to listen to you, hear you out, help you when you need help. They're willing to go that extra step if you're their friend, right? And I find this interesting because the book mentioned the different perspective or different avenues in which male and females actually take as from an approach to networking is men tend to go into networking situations and not to build friendships, but they're more stern and more business. You know what I mean? The point of their networking is to connect with you for a purpose. Meanwhile, how females tend to approach a networking situation or approach something is they would talk more from a friend level. It's kind of like, oh, how are your kids? How's your wife? How's your spouse? Like, what else are you doing? It's more on the interpersonal level versus the more work centric level. And I just
Mm-hmm.
find that very interesting that he broke it down that way because I feel as though I relate more towards the trying to get to know you on an interpersonal level, being able to kind of like chit chat about your life, what you got on, what you're doing, and I think that is much more effective, right? So to answer your question, I define networking as basically making friends,
Mm-hmm.
right? What about you? Is there a strong? Do you draw a strong line between business networking and just networking in general? Like I would consider from this standpoint, I'd consider you a part of my network. You know what I mean? Like, do you draw a firm line between both of them, or are they kind of intermingled for you too?
I think they're intermingled. I think the lines are blurred because I'm very friendly, right? Like I kind of give everybody who I meet, I give them the same respect that I wish to receive. However, like after like one straw with me, it's kind of like all right, like I know where you stand now, right? So like if you're acting goofy, if I can kind of see it's a one-sided relationship, no, like I cut it off. And now I understand like okay, it's not interpersonal anymore. It's strictly business between us because this is how you've acted, right? So I feel like I always give like people the option to either make it business or personal, and I don't mind on either end. But I always approach every relationship similar to what you're saying, a friendship. We can cultivate it however, but it's basically like, hey, let's go off of your lead. If you feel like you just want to be business partners or just strictly business, I'll be professional but strictly business. If I feel the vibe that we're friends, we're friends. You know what I mean? And depending on like how that business or how that relationship cultivates, I can then tell you like, oh, like I would go to bat for you or I would not. You know what I mean? Because I think that's the difference. Like I wouldn't go to bat for somebody who I'm a network in business with. It's a little different, right? Whereas if they're my friend, I'll go to the other side of the moon for you. You know what I'm saying? Just as a friend, like you don't even have to be related to me or anything like that. Like that's just how I am with my friends. You know?
Right. I'm gonna go off of what you said. Hold on, John.
Yeah.
Based on what you just kind of said, if you keep it strictly business, business is business for you, right? And if you develop that friendship contact, you're willing to go over beyond and over and backflip and bend your back backwards, right?
Hmm.
So my question is, okay, if the lines are blurred, do you think you would do something for a friend in business that you wouldn't normally do for somebody who's strictly just business,
Yes.
or vice versa? If you
Yes.
get the question.
I think so.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. They're not mutually exclusive, but I mean, I don't know. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. I'm confusing myself a little bit right
Right.
now too. But I just feel like
Yeah, that was the
people who is
question, I
like
guess.
like strictly business, I keep it like very just business, right? And when I say business, I don't mean I wouldn't go above and beyond for you. I'll keep it professional. I'll still go, like hard. But I just feel like when I value a relationship, our friendship, whatever the case may be, you and I, right? Like we could technically make it just business or in regards to how we do. Like I would go above and beyond for you. You know what I'm saying? And we're in business as well. So I can't like separate the two. It's two in one. That's what I'm trying to say. So some instances it may be mutually exclusive, but in this instance it's not. Right? But
Right.
then, like,
I
okay,
agree.
to give you an example, like a secretary I work with, just because we are in business, doesn't mean I would go above and beyond for this secretary, whether it's a guy or girl, right? I don't know.
Right.
I hope that answers your question.
I guess it does. So, all right, let me ask you this, right? I think the book talks about various places, right? You would want to theoretically network before you do anything, and the whole premise of the book really, dig. What's the title again? Dig your well before you're thirsty, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically set up your network before you actually need your network, right? What do you think about that concept? Do you think people don't abide by it too much, or do you think people only network when they actually need to network? And do you basically agree with the main premise and the title of the book? Should you build a network in something before you even get into it, or do you think you have to get into it before you build your network?
I was taught at a very young age that everyone is your network. Whoever you meet, whoever you speak with, whoever you cross paths with is a part of your network, a potential part of your network, right? It's up to you to make good or bad of that network. So to answer your question, I think a lot of people fail to realize that quote, right? Everybody is your network. So sometimes they go out here, they're acting crazy, they're acting goofy, they're treating people weird, right? Like they're negative, whatever the case may be, and they screw up that network. Long-winded answer is, I do believe that you need to cultivate every relationship in a positive manner. Like whoever you cross paths with, you just need to be positive. You need to be the best you that you can be. And I don't mean to act. I just mean be yourself, right? Like just be a good person because everybody is your network. And I think the book kind of goes towards that, but it also kind of teaches like, oh, like you need to be a little bit more strategic. I don't agree with the strategic like networking, right? Because like of course it helps you solve like certain issues, like if you wanted to be a lawyer, of course, like yo, let me go around some lawyers, let me go to where they would be, he said, like where they're drinking well, right? Go to where they would be like socializing and make some contacts. I think it's a little unnatural to do that, but if you have like a goal in mind, it's a very easy thing to do. Like here, I want to be a lawyer, let me go to where lawyers are, let me learn from them, let me speak to them, let me make rub some shoulders. So I don't know, it's like part of me doesn't want to do that, but part of me understands that's a part of the game. That's the name of the game, right? That's how you build networks. That's how you build. That's how you get jobs. All types of stuff. How about you? Would you say like naturally you like one way or another, whether it be building networks naturally or maybe the unnatural way of like placing yourself where you need to be?
Yeah, I feel as though they are almost the same kind of thing. You know what I mean? Well, at least for me, because if you treat going off of what you said, if you treat everyone you cross paths with as a part of your network and you try to build and cultivate that, like taking deliberate steps to put yourself in a situation, right? It's kind of the same thing. You're putting yourself in a position to cross paths with certain individuals. So I feel as though it's kind of the same thing, whether you think it is or isn't, or whether you think it's deliberate or not deliberate. I feel as who you kind of look for is a little bit different than kind of just rubbing shoulders with everyone. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Because for me, it's kind of hard because again, like I said, I approach every kind of networking situation as like, oh, I want to be your friend. I want to make friends. I'm just like that one step extroverted kind of individual. So it's kind of hard to draw that. deliberate line. You know what I mean? And I think I get this a little bit when I go out to network and stuff too. It's like if I can't vibe with you, I can't network with you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you could put me like, let's just use being a lawyer, right? Since that's what I ended up doing. I go to bar association events, events where I know there are, where I know, from everyone from my age to freaking they've been practicing since like before I was born, right? And that degree, I feel as though there's a degree of separation between a certain class or age of people and myself, and I find it harder to network with those people who seem disconnected from myself. You know what I mean? So even if I deliberately put myself in a situation to rub shoulders and cross paths with people I want to get to know better, for me, it's just maybe it's not as effective or efficient, right? But like that's just how I view networking. And it's interesting because the book kind of mentions doing your homework basically, right? If
Hmm.
you're going to go to an event, make sure you know who might be there, read up on them, know what they are, know what they're about. If you're going to a lecture or a guest speaker or whatever it may be, right? For me, I can't, it's hard for me to roll like that, right? And I think the book really preaches that method of being prepared, and I just can't be prepared.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not as good as a networker as I might think I am.
See, but that's what I mean, right? I think that's the difference between like a natural networking and then a
Right.
deliberate, like I'm trying to get, because I have a great example for this, right? PWC. As you know, I interviewed with a bunch of accounting firms when we were as accounting majors. But with PWC, like I received an offer and this, that, and the third. Not to rub my own horn, just to say, I felt like I wasn't worthy of it. But one thing that I did do is exactly what you just said. I read up on the people before the interviews. I wrote notes to them. I gave notes to their like thank you cards to their secretaries, to their whoever was in line, gatekeeping, right? Similar to what the book was talking about. And I guess like my point is, if I didn't do that, I may or may not have gotten the offer. I may or may not have gotten that opportunity. So I guess like part of me is like, hey, this is a really effective way, the way the book is preaching, to get yourself in places you may not have been able to get into. To I don't want to say to replace, but like let's say if you lack in a skill, if you lack good grades, if you lack interpersonal skills or something like that, it's just a good way to like leave your memory in their memory, right? To leave yourself in their memory, first of mind. They're like, oh yeah, like this is the kid who left the thank you letter. This is the kid who asked me about my high school basketball team that won the championship. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
and just while reading this book, although I'm saying, yeah, it was a very like repetitive book. I think for someone who has never had any like good networking skills, who have never been taught that, could really appreciate some of the skills and some of the lessons within this book,
No, I agree. I
right?
agree with that notion. I think it does a really good job at preaching what it has to preach.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And or it's a broken record. Honestly, I think it's
Sure.
maybe it's because coming from where we're coming from, it feels like a broken record, right?
Yeah.
It feels as though he's repeating a lot of the same things, things that we might think are common sense because that's what professors or teachers or whomever has told us to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just interesting that you bring that point up is so that kind what you're kind of talking about also leads into what the author kind of mentioned with like building and maintaining your network, right?
Yeah.
Was the example of the football coach way back when, and he wanted to get on Ohio State's coaching team. What he ended up doing, he went through his network and got a meeting with one of the assistant coaches. And although they weren't hiring at the same time or like whatever it may be, he made a lasting impression at the initial meeting. But then he followed up. He kept them updated. He basically was just like constantly probing him and letting him know like what he's doing and kind of like following up, right, and getting things ready. And it's funny because I low key think I started to do that with people who I think are in positions where I want to be, right?
Mm.
So I guess maybe this kind of goes back to the deliberate networking and kind of like entrenching yourself early on or planting that seed early on. Because honestly, what I think that's what networking really is you're planting a seed in somebody's mind, right?
Mm.
So when something happens or comes up, they think of you, right? And it works the same way for you too, right? Like when somebody approaches you, I get this every time I think of like networking, I kind of am reminded of the comment I made last week about being narcissistic,
Narcissistic.
and
Yeah.
like throughout reading this book, that's what really kept on propping in my mind was trying to find ways to counter that argument. Maybe it's not as narcissistic as I think or as I like mentioned. And I think the author actually countered that in I think chapter 4, where he talked about risk, and he turned risk into an acronym which stood for reciprocity, interdependence, sharing, and keeping at it. So the first part of it, reciprocity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Pay forward, right? Give when you've been given, give back when you can. So I think that notion kind of effective networking, right? To not become this narcissistic level of networking that I've described is that first part, reciprocity, right? Would you agree? Do you really think so? How many people I've I bet you've probably gotten to know people and networked with people throughout everything you've done. How many people do you think actually abide by that kind of reciprocity? No.
Not enough. Not the
Great.
majority, I would say, right? A lot of people, like you said, I think you defined it very well last week. You said, in order for it not to be narcissistic, networking, that is,
Hmm.
there has to be something received or given, right? Offered, given, which is the reciprocity part of the risk you were just talking about. Without that, because many people approach networking where they don't have reciprocity, right? They're kind of like, well, what is it? They're looking at the person that they want to network with or the group that they want to network with, and they're saying, how can I plant myself there to get what they have, as opposed to like, how can I serve them so that they
Hmm.
can like look at me a certain way, right? I feel like people seldom look at it like that. They seldom look like, not to say nobody, but the majority probably is less altruistic, whereas the book preaches provide something, right? A lot of the books we've been reading provide value, provide a memory, a lasting impression, so that they can kind of reach out to you and be like, hey, like I want to work with this person, regardless if you know a lot about what they're working on or nothing, right? Like a lot of the examples given within the book, some of the people knew nothing. Like for instance, when they asked him to be on the board of
Hmm.
some foundation, right? He was saying like, I don't know
Right.
anything about your foundation. I'm very honored for you to ask me, but I would like to ask a certain amount of questions. So it's very similar to that example. I'm just saying like the majority of people don't approach it where they want to provide reciprocity, but they need to. Would you agree?
Right. I would agree.
Yeah.
So here's on that same note. Here's my question to you. Then, do you think the majority of people are networking wrong, and do you think is that an institutional thing? Do you think people are being taught the wrong way to network?
I don't want to say that they're being taught the wrong way to network. I think they're not being taught the right way to network. And I think the difference is like I think if you have common sense, you can say, I know what networking is. It's kind of putting my person in the place where there are people who I want to be like, right? That's like step one of, hey, how do I network with people? But step
Right.
two is kind of like, all right, how do I put myself in that place and respectfully network, right? How do I
Hmm.
do it so that it's not narcissistic? Because a lot of people are narcissistically or networking, where they're not trying to provide anything. They have nothing to provide, but
Right.
they're taking that initiative by getting there, right, and making those handshakes,
Hmm.
rubbing those shoulders. But maybe they're just not taught the correct way. And I mean, who's to say there's a correct way, right?
Right.
Who's to say?
That's true.
Because in the end of the day, they're planting seeds.
Right. It's funny because the way we talk about this, a kind of like analogy comes to my mind is imagine having a friendsgiving with a bunch of your friends, and you're like the one person who doesn't bring anything. Like you don't bring a dish to the table, but you got your plate, your knife, and your fork, and you're ready to eat though, right?
Mm.
I feel as though that's the difference, right? I feel as though when you're invited to the friendsgiving, everyone wants to show up and eat, right? But to be really included and invited the second time, you better bring something, right? So I think
Exactly.
I think it's two part, right? I feel as though people understand that when you network, you have to do something, give something, and so I think the disconnect really might just be in terms of level.
Hmm.
Like, say if I'm networking with the CEO, right? I want to show him that I can do X, Y, and Z. That's me showing my value, right? But if I'm networking with peers, what's the purpose of me showing you, my peer, my equal, my value? You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So maybe that's where some of the disconnect really comes from. It kind of gets flooded and flushed around where people just don't. People basically, it's kind of like not bringing your A game every single time, right?
See, but
And I think maybe
that's a horrible way to network and a horrible way to treat your friends, right? Why would you provide
right.
this stranger like your A game, but not the people who you care for and who is your lifelong network? And I think you're right. Like people, they just neglect that. They don't come with their A game all the time.
Or maybe it's what we were kind of mentioning earlier. Like we see the line blurred, right? So like in a business professional context, so maybe not everyone sees it as blurred lines, right? Maybe everyone can. Maybe we're doing it wrong, and people can
Maybe.
draw that divide, right? That line where they go, all right, in this setting. So law school is a good example because we do preach networking and to go out there and make effective. So if me and you we're two law students, we go to a bar function, right? And somebody's a practicing attorney, we treat them with a slightly different respect, per se. You know what I mean? Because they're where we aspire to be,
Mm.
right? And there's no need for me to kind of give you my A game in this situation, right? Because we're friends already. We already have that back and forth, that kind of relationship already built. While I'm trying to cultivate a different relationship with somebody else on a different level, right? So do you think it's partially that? Do you think it's not that people neglect their friends, but it's situational and people tend to lean more towards the situation than to what they have to fall back on?
Yeah, I think you're right. It's for sure situational because I guess in the end of the day, like it's the comfortability, right? Like comfortable, how comfortable you are with the person as well. What you're trying to achieve, right? Like because I guess if you see this person all the time and they're your friend, like you're not necessarily trying to I don't know. I don't know. It's hard. It's hard to tell. But I do agree with why like they would act that way when it comes to a CEO or a manager who you're looking to be hired by, right? And it's funny
Right.
that you mentioned that cuz although I'm not a lawyer, I work at a law firm and I see lawyers sitting with partners all the time, like attorneys sitting with partners, right? And I can tell who the attorney, like who the newer attorneys are and who the partner is.
Mhm.
And they're all perked up, like looking at them like with these like big eyes because they're trying to like wow them, right? And impress them. And I can hear the
Right.
conversations while I'm eating and I'm like, man, you kissing ass right now, dog. Stop kissing ass. But in the end of the day though, right? My point is like some of those people may be peers and they may be
Mhm.
friends, so they wouldn't treat each other the same way at that round table as they would the partner, right? There's that level of
Mhm.
respect. There's that. You're right. It's a level of. It's unfortunate that it's like that. I don't like that, but it's nature. I suppose it's nature, right? Like you don't treat the grandmom the same way you treat your brother, like you know.
Right.
So I don't
It's
know.
that ask tendency some people are just born and they have.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
It's
It's
funny.
funny.
It's funny that we mentioned talking about like from that perspective because I can like from where you work because I know you work at a much larger law firm than I work at,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I can understand that whole notion of newer associates completely like kissing ass.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I've gotten that comment from one of our senior associates where I work, and she's like, "Hey, man, no need to kiss any ass. Like, it's fine. Like, just provide good work product, which is showing your value and your worth,
Right.
right? There's no need to cover. Like, if you do shitty work, it doesn't matter how much ass you kiss, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're providing a shitty product. You're just a shitty person.
See, but I would argue, right? Like the book says, like I would argue that I don't know, man. I don't know. I feel like I'm not the like I don't have quality work growing up. Like okay, let's say for instance, grades.
Right.
I didn't have a 4.0, but I still got in the seat
I
with
did
a person who had a 4.0. And how did I
Mhm.
do that? I felt like it was through networking, through those little personal touches and stuff. So to give your example, like maybe somebody's a shitty worker, but they're a better networker, and that may put them in a better light than a person who has better work results but a shitty networking skill. Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense because I think law school is a very great example of this.
Mm.
Is that you'll run into those people where they're the 4 point. So at my law school, we had like a 4.5 GPA. There are
Oh
people with
wow.
fives, super smart, super bright. And that's it. Like
Yes.
that's all. At a certain point, that's all they had to offer. They're a little weird. They're a little awkward. They're a
Mm-hmm.
little bit disconnected. And if anyone from my law school is listening, I love you all. Right? I'm not talking shit, but like some people are just in the profession itself. Some people are just a little bit disconnected from it, right?
Yeah.
And I feel as though the people who do well. So agree. Tell me if you agree with me. The people who do well and are successful in life can balance both. They can
Yes.
provide a very good to decent work product and they can network efficiently or effectively.
Yeah, I think the people who tend to do the best are people who can balance,
Right.
right? Because like I don't know, I just feel like time and time again, the people who have balance in regards to interpersonal skills as well as technical skills win. It's not always the person who is like the perfect technical worker, the perfect whatever, inventor, whatever the case may be, right? Those people kind of don't shine. And why is that? It's not because they're not capable. They're clearly capable,
Right.
but it's because they're lacking the balance. And I feel like that's a lesson that I learned very young as well. And it seems like you have as well, because like you have great interpersonal skills as well as technical skills. So my point is, you need the balance, man. People who have the balance, they have something that a lot of people without technical perfection have. Does that make sense? So
No,
yeah,
I get
they
what
may
you're
not be technically perfect, but they have that balance that kind of lifts where they're lacking.
Right.
Mhm.
They have a way of making up for what they're not good at, basically.
Exactly.
Or in a better sense, they can cover their ass.
For sure. For sure.
But it's interesting because like you would think like a very simple topic like networking, right? It's clean cut, it's black and white, it is what it is, right? There's actually so many nuances to it, right? And
Mhm.
I think the book really hits on the importance of details and nuances, and that's because again, like I mentioned earlier, like in today's day and age, everyone's preaching the value and benefit of why you need to network, right?
Mhm.
And I think realistically, it's coming down to those. It's starting to really come down to the details, the nuances, kind of like what the book was saying, how the importance of interdependency and sharing, right? Just if we're going to break down the risks um, thing he mentioned. So
Mhm.
interdependency is basically like, having that connection and depending on each other, right? So like example, like let's say if I wanted a job at your the fact that me and you have already cultivated a very good relationship might help me, not land the job, but get an interview with somebody or be able to use you as the touch point to somebody else. Right. So what do you think about interdependency? Do you think it's sometimes overlooked or forgotten?
I don't know. I don't think it's overlooked for sure. It's almost like a secret weapon, right? Like a trick under your sleeve. I think a lot of
Mhm.
people though, like we mentioned before, aren't taught some of these little nuances. And that's the difference between somebody who's a great networker and somebody who just knows what networking is, right?
Right.
So when they lack that interpersonal like relationship or inter kind of like the person within the structure that they need to
Right.
be,
Right.
when they lack that, they kind of lack that card, right? They can't play that card. Now they're lacking those opportunities. They're lacking the
Mhm.
conversations, the opportunities to rub shoulders with people that are important. Um, it's a big. Yeah, you're right. It's overlooked. It's undertaught, overlooked, and
Right.
maybe not
So
exercised enough.
I wonder if it's viewed in the same in a different way because I know the book mentioned this and I've heard I've heard it in this way more the 6 degrees of separation,
Yeah.
right, where everyone's 6 touch points from each other. So
Mm,
basically, like the CEO 6 people down the line connects to me
yeah.
somehow, some way, right? Do you think so? Maybe it's not like interdependency, but it's just the degrees of separation you have to one person, and we just understand it differently.
Maybe. I don't know. That one's a little more tough. I feel like because when I think of the examples, they're very situational, right?
Hmm.
They're very very situational. Um, I think
So then,
ultimately though, go ahead, go.
I was gonna say, do you think networking is all situational then?
It sure
Right?
is though, right? Because every time we're saying something, I'm like, man, he's right. Like you're right. You're right in what you're saying. But then I can very like quickly think of examples in my life where I've networked where I can argue like, oh, it's the opposite, right?
Hmm.
And it's not to say you're wrong or I'm wrong because our experiences could be different.
Right.
In the end of the day, networking is just two people, right? One or more people, or groups of people, whatever the case may be, getting together and trying to plant those seeds, like you said. And whether or not they cultivate those seeds is another story, right? But like
Right.
everybody has different approaches to network. For instance, I am a pretty good networker with my neighbors. I'm a good networker with my mailman, with whoever I see on my block, right? Like I'm almost like a what do you call it? Like
You're like the grandpa,
yeah,
grandpa
like a
sitting
grandpa, right? Like
there.
one of those guys on the block you always say hi to, right?
Right.
But
Always sitting
I
on the
don't even
stoop.
do it purposely. I don't do it because I want something from them. I do it because I respect them. I don't walk past somebody and don't say hi, right? Or I don't
Right.
like see an older person and don't help them with shoveling their snow or whatever the case may be. And my point is, those are some of the things that people. I don't know if it's natural. I don't think I was taught that kind of stuff. Maybe, maybe not. No, I think we were taught that. I think we were taught that. It's kind of like an Asian culture, right? When you more about, which means like
Yeah.
you kind of greet them in a respectful way, right?
Mhm.
Very young, we were taught that, and I was almost like yelled at when I didn't do that. You know what I'm saying? So now it's like as an adult, I don't realize that those were the kind of seeds that our parents planted in us. So let's say if our parents didn't do that, right? Would we be now disrespectful and not say hi to people, or would we not greet people?
Gotcha. So, all right, on that note, then let me ask you this. So, do you think that's what kind of leads to that? What I was talking about earlier, that kind of separation, where when you go into a networking event, you're worried about the person who has a higher rank than you. You know what I mean? Like kind of like your situation. You're
Mm-hmm.
on, but in terms of your peers, your peers, right? You guys are on the same level. You know what I mean? You guys are bowing forward and giving respect up to everyone, but there's whether or not there's mutual respect amongst the same people on the same line, that's a whole different story. But do you think that kind of cultural difference is what kind of affects, at least from our perspective, affects networking? So the question then, do you think cultural differences affects networking?
Yes. And it can be a pro or a con. And the reason why I'm saying that is because we could have an opportunity just by simply being respectful in the workplace. I've had that my whole life. People are like, man, like, I don't know were you raised in a military family? Yada, yada, yada. No, I wasn't raised in a military family. I was never in the military myself, but I was raised with respect. So that's one way an opportunity could arise, right? Based on our culture, our Asian culture. However, I can also think like, okay, another benefit to a culture that doesn't kind of respect that is maybe they lack the respect where they're like, oh, like I won't speak without being spoken to, whatever the case may be, but they miss out on opportunities because they're not bold enough to go and just talk to the top guy there. Let's say a partner was there and I wanted to be a lawyer and I just want to go straight to the source. Forget the 6 points of contact. I'm going straight to the top. Right? There are people who maybe they lack that cultural discipline, I guess is the word, right? And they just go straight to the source. And now they have an opportunity because they rub shoulders with the big guy and they made him laugh
Right.
or they made an impression. So I guess those are the two coins, right? Like I'm thinking it could benefit you culturally, the traditions, the values that you hold. It can also harm you as well. Agreed?
I agree. I agree. Because yeah, I think especially like with Asian culture, I feel there's a lot more times we're a lot more reserved
For
than
sure.
anything. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And we might not take that additional extra step that somebody else who wasn't from our same kind of culture would would take, and they'd end up our boss, and then we're like, since we grew up in America, we're like, God dang, basically your buddy just got promoted, and you're good for it, but
Yeah.
I also have a chance for the promotion too. You know what I mean? So I agree. So cultural values do really play a role, especially if you're networking internationally. I know the book mentioned international networking, how easy it is now to build a global network and how it might actually be important to build a global network.
Hmm.
So on that note, I think it's starting to become more common and more important for people to understand not only your norms, what kind of goes on in your society, but also kind of like global norms, right? Because business is international at this point, right?
Yeah.
The amount of domestic business is, it it it's small in comparison to how much global business is being done from any perspective, right? So
Mm-hmm.
understanding how to network in different cultures, basically, not even different languages, I think gives you an edge, realistically. Do you agree?
I agree. Um, it's also scary, right? Okay, and here's what I'm thinking when you're saying that. Because the scale of how we network can be so large and so fast now with the internet, with social media.
Right.
It's also very easy to offend people, right? So like although it's like here it goes back to that conversation about is social media and the internet like largely greater for networking or is it also harmful? I think it's both. It's great in many senses like you mentioned in the beginning, but there's also many things that I see are like, whoa, it's scary, right? Because I could say one wrong I could send out one tweet that's wrong
Right.
and really screw up my public image, my
Hmm.
network, right? People who maybe thought a certain way of me, now they're like, whoa, like they can cancel you, right? That's a thing now, getting
Right.
canceled. Um,
Right.
it's so scary because you really don't know what's offensive, what's not, especially in a time where you and I, like, we're doing a live podcast right now, right? This is live. This is not scripted. This is not filtered in any way. We're speaking our minds, and
Right.
although like we're educated and we're fairly, I don't know, like I would say we're fairly respectable and all of that. We could definitely say something right now that could offend somebody on a global level, right? Somebody from Vietnam could
Right.
be watching. They're like, yo, like, what is this dude talking about? Like, he doesn't represent us.
You don't know what he's talking about, right?
Exactly.
Right.
So I think that's scary. And just to go to your point, like global networking or just networking in general on a global scale is great, but it's also that power is scary. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I kind of agree. Yeah, it's interesting that you look at it like that because so I guess it kind of goes back to the whole notion of blur, like where the lines are blurred. Do you keep a very strict professional network? Do you keep a side network of your buddies? Like that's the
Yeah.
whole point of keeping your page private kind of situation. But no, I agree. Since we are doing this live, we kind of like avail ourselves to whatever comes. You know what I mean? We're
Mhm.
talking however we feel realistically, right?
Mhm.
It's basically impromptu. It's reactionary. When you say something to me, I respond. When you say, and vice versa. And it's interesting that you bring up that point because you're right. You don't know what you can say or what you can do that might become very offensive. And
Mm.
then that can actually just throw you for a whole spiral and a whirlwind, and it just takes everything for a trip. So this goes to something I forget which book it was in, but kind of the notion of I think it was in again, my boy Seth, he's still with me. All information is subject to interpretation, right?
Yes.
So do you think networking, right, and everything that we're talking about right now is subject to interpretation? So we're basically whatever we say, somebody else might take offense to it, but maybe 8 out of 10 people don't take offense to it. Are we supposed to now not say what we feel, think, and believe, right? In the event or the fear of offending someone we don't know who might be offended, right? Do we let that fear kind of dictate us when we're not sure when we might get hit with it?
Mm. I think about this all the time, bro. Because as you know, I live stream like off of this professional platform. I live stream games, right? So
Right.
when I'm on the game, like, bro, I'd say all types of stuff. People say all types of stuff on the stream. Yeah, like if I'm being honest, somebody could pop up in there one moment and be like, "What the heck is going on right now?"
Right, right.
Yes, you do kind of have to watch like what you say and what you do, but I feel like as long as you're just a genuine good person, right? And why do I say that? As long as you're not hating on anybody, as long as you're not being offensive purposely, like with a purpose, right? Because everybody makes mistakes. Everybody will slip up and say something that they may have been insensitive but didn't realize at the moment, particularly with these live streams. Because, like I said, what comes out of your mouth is captured on the internet, and boom, it goes from here to Singapore. Like, there's people
Everywhere,
in
right?
London,
Everyone
right?
sees
Like, there's people watching us
it.
all over the place. And my point is, like, although you do have to watch what you say, I think you should just do like a general filter, meaning don't say anything hateful, don't say anything harmful, be a genuine good person, and let everything else rock. Because at the end of the day, you are who you are, right? Like how you were raised, your experiences, how you talk, social linguistics, how I talk with you, how I talk with the professor, versus how I talk to my boys from Jersey City, like very different conversations. Um, but all of it is me and all of it is you. Like how I talk to you and how you talk to me, I understand this is who you are and this is who I am. I feel like at the end of the day, you just have to be yourself. You have to be yourself. Because now if you keep filtering everything you say, now are you yourself anymore? Are these even your
Right. I was gonna
thoughts?
get.
Right?
Hmm.
It's not even your
Yeah,
thoughts
that was
anymore.
that was my follow up. Really, like
Mm-hmm.
at what point do you keep on like at what point do you stop? Realistically, you know what I mean? Just off of what I told you before we even started this whole streaming thing, I asked you. I was like, "Yo, I curse a lot. Is that fine? Like, is
Mm-hmm.
that cool?" And I catch myself doing that in certain situations with certain individuals where I would curse, but just because I cursed a lot growing up, whether it be in English or Vietnamese, like I grew up cursing a lot. So it's just like it's very natural to me. So when it happens, like I take a step back and I go, oh, like I'm sorry, I curse a lot. It's just a part. It's just a part of my vernacular. Like it's not. It's like me saying when, who, what, where. It's almost like a filler word,
Yeah.
realistically, right? And it's at what point do you keep on? Do you keep on filtering yourself? You know what I mean? And do you? do you think you miss opportunities? Like, let's say people do consider keep on filtering and changing themselves to fit whatever perception or reality they're in, or whatever network they're trying to fit in. Do you think people try to fake it to make it too much?
Yes. But it's just unfortunate. That is a result of the world we live in. People are afraid to be canceled. People are afraid to
Mhm.
be condemned. And that's not even like a new thing. Always. People hate being condemned. People don't like for somebody to point the finger at them and say you're wrong or don't do
I
that,
agree.
right? Like we hate that. We hate that as a society, as a human being. We hate that. That feeling, that condemnation. Nobody likes that. But in the end of the day though, the people I feel like who are most memorable are not the most agreeable people, right? And
That's
what
true
do I
because
mean
you
by that? Like
remember.
even if they're
Right,
way
no,
out there, like way, like
uh,
Trump, for instance. Trump is one of those people who hate him or love him, whatever the case may be, you will remember him.
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another example, maybe Joe Rogan. Similar. Very. It's kind of like those people stand out for the reason that they are who they are, and they're
Hmm.
unapologetic about it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's I agree. For better or for worse. You know what I mean? Just them saying a good example of what's going around. Jake and Logan Paul, same way. Unapologetically, they are themselves, right? And it's like it is a quote I tend to say a lot. It is what it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like, listen, love them or hate them. Like you can hate them, but that gives them clout. You can love them, it gives them clout, right? And that like on that level, they're just people who say certain things, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you will always remember, no matter what, right? Just kind of like go flipping off. Like I was listening to a lecture for one of my bar exams, and what came up we were talking about professional responsibility and how to be professional, and a quote about sexual relations came up, and the person they ended up making reference to was a past president,
Yeah.
and it's just funny because it's things like that where whether you love them or you hate them or you disagree with them. There's certain points where if you be honest and you're just being real, if you believe in what you say with conviction, right? I
Mm.
think people will just remember you for that.
Yeah.
Just because you said some off the wall shit
Let me give you
with
a good
conviction.
example. The guy, I want to say his name is Samuel. I don't know his name, honestly. I forget. But African American gentleman, glasses, clean cut, talks about women a lot. You know what I'm talking about? On social media. No? Anyway, okay, let me give you an example. His name is Sam or Samuel something. I don't know his name, so I don't want to quote it, but he is out there when it comes to speaking about women, right? He's like, oh, like women, like he has interviews with women on social media all the time, and he's like, oh, well, like he's a professional. I don't know what his title is, but
Right.
he stands out to me, and he's very interesting to me, not because of what he says, but it's the bluntness of how he says it. It's like
Hmm.
whether or not there's no emotion. He just spits facts. This is the fact.
Right.
Take the emotion out of it, and that's just an example of what I'm trying to say, right? People who are like that tend to stand out in your mind forever. And I don't
Hmm.
just mean like for a year or two. I'm probably gonna remember this guy for the rest of my life just because of the way he
Right.
approaches life, conversations, and things of that nature. You know?
Hmm. Well, so this kind of like swinging this whole entire thing since time. I guess swinging this back to like networking and why networking is important, how you stand out. Like, is it doing something like that? Do you think being your true authentic self is what actually distinguishes you in a network? And is that like an effective or efficient way to network? Being true to yourself.
No. I I I say no and yes. I don't know. I feel like yes. Yes, because you don't want to network similar to what you said. There are lawyers when you go to certain banquets. I think you said banquets or meetings, right? The bar
Or
association.
whatever.
That's what you said, right? When you go there, of course there are lawyers your age, so you want to kind of meet them, etc. But it doesn't mean you need to get along with them, right? So that's you being genuine. That's you genuinely saying like, "Oh, I just don't vibe with this person, so I'm not going to network."
Right.
But that cuts off your opportunities. Whereas where you're a little more strategic and you may be fake it till you make it, kind of like we said, you can network with everybody here. Everybody in that bar would love you, and maybe
Right.
you have more opportunities because of that. And I don't like that's why I say yes and no, right? Because I see the benefit to both. I really
Right.
prefer the genuine networking because those are the longer lasting
Hmm.
relationships. These are the people I get along with. I see something in this person that I really enjoy and I genuinely feel connected to them. Here's that seed. Let's grow it. Whereas when it's like a fake it till you make it, man, I don't really care for this person. I'm probably not going to reach out and ask about their kids because I don't care. You know what I mean?
No, it's interesting because this is how I think about it a little bit. So instead of if we coin it to make it and don't network with people you don't like, why don't we frame it as this? Well, this is how I frame it in my mind. Showing your value, showing your worth, right? It doesn't matter if you hate the person, right? You can hate the person, but they can do a good job. It doesn't matter. Results are results, right? So do you like I would say approach networking almost as result orientated. Always present your worth or your value to whomever it may be. And the more genuine networks, you get a side of fries with your burger, right? You're
Mm-hmm.
getting the extra bits and pieces of me, and you're not going to get all of my time, right? But the first 15 minutes is me showing everyone my value, my worth, and the next 15 minutes is me cultivating the more interpersonal things. So that's how I look at that and would answer my own question, I guess. But all right, let's wrap things up. Do you recommend the book?
Yes, if you are a novice at networking. I feel like you said it's definitely like networking for dummies, right? And I don't mean
Right.
that in a disrespectful way. I think he laid it out nicely. It was slightly repetitive, but I would recommend the book to somebody who needs networking help.
Right, 100% agree with you. Like, nothing against the author. I think the author highlighted some things that I kind of didn't even like, things that I knew but didn't really like fully understand. Like, again, the value of cultivating your network, right?
Mm.
Like, you can establish your network and it could grow dull. Like what he said, a frayed string, right? Try to like reattach it and kind of like cultivate it and build it up and like, wax it over and keep it growing and keep it going. That's something I'm very guilty of not doing all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think, even if you're a veteran networker, I feel as though you can still read maybe the first chunk of the book.
Yeah.
If you're a beginner at networking and you like, if networking scares the crap out of you, right? I think this book will give you confidence, right? It's kind of like when it's like if you watch a YouTube video on how to do something, you're more inclined to try it, right? I think if you're very terrified and you don't know how to network or don't want to network, this book might just give you that little push you need. So that's where I stand on the book. So I recommend it. I'd recommend it for everyone, realistically.
Mm-hmm.
It's a short read. It wasn't super long either. So, I mean, whether you're experienced or not, like, I think it can give you something. Right. You want to break out a spinner?
Yes, sir. Let's bring out the spinner.
Do it.
Let's see what this next book is gonna be, guys. I'm excited because that book, the title got me. I'll
Mm-hmm.
leave it with
I
this. The
agree.
title definitely was more interesting than what the content was. Cause I'm
Right.
thinking, oh, this is about to be fire. You hear the title, dig your well before you're thirsty. I'm like, okay, but it makes sense also, right? That's what networking is, right? Just planting that seed before you need the fruit, so to speak.
Right. Right. It's kind of like getting ready. It's like you don't want to sit on a cold toilet seat. If you could warm your seat up before you sit down on it, right? So
Exactly.
it's
I'm.
kind of
I'm
the same thing. It's like if
yeah.
you could do something beforehand to get ready for it, right? I think the title of the book goes perfectly with what people preach in fitness, I guess. You warm up,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I think that the book is a good warm up book. Like it teaches you, it kind of like rehints and teaches you the importance of warming up.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I would phrase it.
All right, let's get this spinner out. I'm gonna shuffle it a couple times, as you guys know I usually do, just so we get a good mix. And I'm gonna spin it right now, Tom. Ooh. High performance habits.
I,
I'm not gonna lie, bro. There is one thing I want to know. I would prefer to pick a book with a little story right now because we've been going through some of these books and I'm
oh,
just like, man, the
right.
repetitiveness is crazy. But I'm hoping high, what is it? High, what did I say? Man, I forgot already.
High performance. You know what that means? That means we should just like pick a book at this point.
I mean, yo, honestly, right? I mean, I think as we're going through this, we could pick different things, right? Especially if we're going like book, like one or two, three books, and we're like, hey, man, like that wasn't really interesting. But these
Right.
books are heavily recommended. That's why I'm a little confused sometimes because it's like, I guess it's all down to interpretation, man. Our boy Seth is forever in our minds. You know what I'm saying?
He's always going to be there from this day forward, man.
High performance habits. That's what it's called, brother.
All righty. So, all right, how about this? Next week, if we get another one more so non-story based self-help books, we're just going to pick next week.
That sounds great to me, man. That sounds great.
Do that.
All right,
All
guys.
right.
That was episode 7. Dig your well before you're thirsty with Tom and Steve. I hope you guys have a great one. Tom, See you soon, brother.
All right, my guy. Talk
Always
to
a
you.
pleasure, man. See you.
Likewise.